Yeah, we're just kind of waking up, so we're pounding down coffee. And,
You and me both.
yeah.
California.
We came in from New Bedford. Is that Massachusetts? Anybody know for sure? Anybody care?
No, we're just not here in Ithaca.
It's Connecticut.
Connecticut. It's not Connecticut.
It's not?
No, it's
Oh,
Massachusetts. Didn't anybody go to school?
50 years ago.
Yeah,
Okay. Anyway, it's the place where they had whales. You know, they went whaling, you know. Moby Dick. New Bedford was the whaling capital of the world at that time. I don't know why I know that. So hi.
Hello. Welcome, Geoff Tate, and we have Scott and Kieran, right? Kieran. Okay. We really appreciate you being here today. Geoff Tate, of course, is performing tonight at the Haunt in Ithaca.
And so is Kieran and Scott.
Yes, they're all performing together. Incredible lineup, and we're going to hear some tunes shortly. I just want to remind you one more time to please turn off the volume on your cell phones. All right, thank you very much. So I was thinking maybe you guys could begin with a tune, and then I have some questions from some of the guests here today. And
Sure, you don't want to start with questions first?
we can do that if you'd like as
I'd
well.
love that.
All right, well, since you're here in central New York, and we were talking a little in the car, and I was telling you that Ronnie James Dio is from Portland, so we
Yeah.
have a lot of Dio fans and actually family and friends of Dio. And I noticed that one of your first tours was with him. Would you talk a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, well, Ronnie was a dear friend, actually, and one of the first, I guess, sponsors of my music was Queensryche, and he was one that really believed in the band and gave us an opportunity to tour with him, and we opened up quite a few shows for him throughout the world. First time we ever played in Europe was with him. And he's just a very generous, kind man, and he always told you what he thought, you know, was very truthful and upfront, and he valued that, I think. And one of the greatest things about him that I remember, which was so different than anybody I'd ever met before, was he, the first day we were on tour, he invited us all up to his dressing room. This is my whole band. We all went up, and he introduced everybody in his band to us, first name basis. Hi, this is, you know, blah, 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 this is blah, 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 you know. And then he had all the crew come in, and we all shook hands and got to know each other. We all sat down and had a dinner, Indian food, which I'd never had before, so it's just a new thing for me. And that I thought, well, this is very civilized, you know, and that never happened again on any other tour I was ever on. No, the headliner never invited us to the dressing room, never introduced themselves or anything like that. But that's the way Ronnie was, you know.
Very gracious.
Great guy.
So when it comes to you and your vocals, you know, if you look up the top lists of metal singers, you're usually on it. How have you been able to maintain such strong vocals over the years?
Well, you know, I made this deal with Satan. And
At the
ever
crossroads?
since then, everything's been great.
Are you listening, Blabbermouth?
Geoff Tate says made a deal with Satan. Yes. No wonder they kicked him out of the band. No, I don't know. I just, I work it. You know, I use it a lot. It's a muscle, and so you got to use it, keep it working, you know. That's my philosophy. I'm sticking with it.
Keeping those warm-ups up to date.
Oh, and I don't do heroin.
Okay, that's good. Staying away from the meth too, right? Yeah. I do have some questions here from the audience members, and one comes from this. Okay, this was about the Dio we just talked about. So, one wants to know, are you ever going to play again at the Couch House in San Juan?
Coach House.
Coach House, oh sorry, I can't read. I'm reading handwriting here. In San Juan, because she lives across the street. That's Shirley's question.
Well, I'll tell you, we play there every year.
I know I missed your last one.
Oh, because we were just
I
there.
heard it in the backyard.
Oh. Which is, so if you're standing on the roof of the Coach House, which way would we turn to shout at your backyard?
That way.
And your name is what?
Shirley.
Shirley. So we'll go, Shirley! We're
Yeah,
here.
I'll be sure I'm there next time.
I love playing that place.
I'm surprised.
Yeah, it's a great place. Great place.
And she flew all the way here just to see you today.
Really? Oh, okay. That's nice.
So she said.
Sorta.
Oh, okay.
We were friends with Ronnie.
Oh, okay, great.
Another question we have is from Lonnie Park, and he says, in '88, Operation Mindcrime was a huge part of his days, invariably an inspiration and influence on his own future music. Lonnie is an established musician. Who was it that you listened to who inspired and influenced you?
Well, I grew up in that wonderful time of the 60s and 70s where rock music was just really getting going, and there wasn't the the boxes and the restrictions on it that we have today. The term genre hadn't been applied to music yet, so artists were very free to explore and to experiment with what they were doing, and there was some great stuff coming out. And I think I was like any kid growing up that time. We listened to everything. We didn't have to fit in by listening to a certain type of music, so we just listened to everything, from Janis Joplin to Hendrix to Otis Redding to the later Alice Cooper was the first. The $1 Billion Babies tour was the first tour I ever saw in 1973. I was like, wow, I want to do that. I want to cut up little baby dolls and stuff.
Well, to follow that up with that, speaking of genres, as far as your work over the years, and when Queensryche came out and really started to gain popularity, it's interesting to think about where Queensryche fits in, because you're considered metal, but you're also considered, is it grunge? You're coming from Washington and the Seattle area. I mean, how do you classify your work?
Oh, it's easy, alphabetically. Q.
Q.
There's very few of us in the Q area,
Progressive metal.
Queen,
Yeah, Queen.
Quicksilver Messenger Service, Susie Quattro. Who am I forgetting? Oh, what was that? Quarter Flash.
Oh, Heart in My Heart.
Heart in my heart. Yeah.
Well, we're here again with Geoff Tate and his band members, and let's talk about the lineup, Scott.
Well, I'm sorry. People ask me that all the time. They say, "Well, what genre do you fit in?" Because, and it's hard for me to say too, because back then we didn't have genres. We didn't have those boxes. That came later. The term mullet. That wasn't around when we wore mullets. That was a derogatory term that was coined by the millennials, later on, Butt rock, that didn't exist. That wasn't a title or a name, So those are all things that came later.
Well,
Does that answer your question?
yes, it does, absolutely. I think Q is great. Well, maybe we'll get into some of the music. Because tonight you're going to be performing Empire and Rage for Order in the entire 30th anniversary of Empire. Does it feel like it's been that long?
Most of the time not, but some days yes. Especially when after a long drive and you climb out of that bunk on the bus and you're like, oh my God. How old am I? This year I turned 61.
Wow.
And I know. Crazy. Wow, he says. Yeah, that's what I said. In fact, until 2 days ago, I thought I was 60. And somebody that's close to me was doing the math. I go, Geoff, you're not 60 or 61. So, yeah. But yes, we are playing Rage for Order in its entirety, simply because I want to. And then Empire, we're playing in its entirety because it's the 30-year anniversary. So.
Nice.
You want to do a song
Let's do it.
from Rage for Order to start things off? This is a kind of an interesting, weird song. This was written, 1985, 6, somewhere around there. And it's about spy satellites and technology kind of controlling our lives, which it's really happened, now.
You're ahead of your time.
Where would we be without our cell phones and our connection to everybody in the world, via satellite? It's so strange. But anyway, this is called I Will Remember. I'm really loud.
Sound
That's
absolutely
awesome.
incredible. Incredible. And speaking of incredible, I would like to talk about this current lineup that you're with. You guys are really tight. You sound amazing. So how did you have some interesting stories on how you got together, and I'd love to hear some of it.
Yeah. Well, Scott and I have played together off and on since 2000. It's around 2000, yeah. In various configurations with solo projects and with Queensryche and so forth. And Kieran, I met Kieran. Kieran's dad is a promoter in Glasgow, Scotland, and I was playing a show his dad was promoting, and Kieran was at the show, and he hit on my daughter. And they started like, a thing, and I guess maybe 7 or 8 months later, Emily and Kieran had kept in contact, and they were writing songs together and making music together, and they have a band together. And I had an acoustic tour that was going out around the world, and I had a tour that was starting up in the United States in like 5 days, and all of my band got turned away, and they couldn't come into the country. So I didn't have a band, and I had 5 days till the date, right? I had a sold out, U.S. tour, right? Oh my God. So I'm like frantically trying to find players who I can grab at that moment. And Emily says, Dad, how about if we hired that boy I met in Glasgow, Kieran? He's a really good guitar player. So I called him, I go, can you be here? He says, yeah. Can you learn all the stuff? Yeah, don't worry. No problem. I'll be there. He shows up, plays everything perfectly. So he's still here.
So that's to his part, right?
Yeah, so
You opened up Homer.
Yeah. And then the other guys in the band, Jack Ross was a buddy of Kieran's, bass, and fantastic bass player, and he's worked out really well. Been playing with him for a while now, 3 years, I guess. And tonight on this tour in the U.S., this leg of the U.S., we have a phenomenal drummer, Edu Cominato, who's from Sao Paulo, Brazil. One of the finest drummers I think we've all ever played with. He's just a superb player, and he's on the drum kit on this tour with us.
very exciting. And again, tonight at the Haunt in Ithaca, and you can see the rest of the band along with these fine musicians who have joined us today. And as you can see, Geoff, next to you is some Finger Lakes wine, because you're in Finger Lakes wine country. But you have started your own wine company.
I have. I started it in 2007, was my first vintage. It's called Insania, and the wine is made in a little corner of southwest Germany, right between Switzerland and France and Germany. A beautiful little area called Moughton, and the family that makes the wine and grows the wine grapes on their property has been making wine for 400 years. Yeah, they're my wife's relatives, of all things, and it's really beautiful. Every end of October we have a big harvest festival where we issue the new wine, barrel tastings and all that. And we all gather there for a week of drinking too much and eating too much. It culminates with a big party on the last day, and all these different musicians show up from around the world, and we have a big jam session. And it's all free, and it's all pretty fun, and it keeps getting bigger and bigger. We're probably going to have to regulate it at some point, because thousands of people are starting to show up, and what do you do with all those people?
You'd love to get some of that wine, but as you pointed out earlier, it's sold out here in the States.
I had a very fun weekend in the Finger Lakes one year. I came up with some friends, and they showed me all the different wineries, and we went everywhere and tried all the different wines, and amazing cheese here too.
Yeah.
If you like cheese, it's incredible. It's a beautiful, beautiful spot.
I still got 2 bottles of your wine.
Do you?
Yeah, you signed one for me in Homer.
Oh, okay.
The Cab Sauv.
And you haven't drank it yet?
No, it's 2009. You said, John, it's
Well, you should drink it.
Guys, it's vintage. You should drink it now.
Yeah, drink it.
Oh, you can drink it.
Yeah, drink it. I'll make more.
There you go. And actually, this next question this is John here, it comes from John, and he says, so you've done Operation Mindcrime in its entirety, now Rage for Order and Empire. What's next for the future? Promised Land, question mark, in its entirety?
Well, I I don't know. I'm just sort of still wrapping my head around this tour, really, which is really fun and really challenging. Apparently, people don't do 2 albums back to back live, so
Never.
this is something quite out of the ordinary. I didn't really even think of that before. But after the first week, when I was like really tired and couldn't get off my bed because it was so exhausting, I was thinking, maybe I should rethink that. No, but we've been having great shows, great turnouts. We've had so many sold out shows already. It's fantastic. But for future, I don't have a plan. And Promised Land would be pretty ambitious.
How about Warning?
Yeah, Warning would be interesting. The thing about Promised Land, though, it's one of my favorite Queensrÿche records, but it's very melancholy. I don't know if that works for a live show so much. I love being melancholy. I love, giving into that feeling, but I don't know if that works in a live atmosphere, though.
One of my favorites, too.
You can tell he's a fan. A huge fan, yes. Well, great. If you have time, we'd love to hear another song from you.
Yeah, time. This is from the Empire album. And see how we did that? We started with the Rage song, and now we're moving into the...
See what you did there.
There's some thought that went into this. This is a song that I'm so glad that I wrote this song, because this song is everywhere. It's on all the radio stations, and it's a song that has got so many people singing along to it. I love it. If you feel like singing along, please do, okay? It's that kind of song. It sounds good with people singing.
What is it?
Oh, it's Jet City Woman. Every time I leave, you say you won't be there, and you're always there. Every time I cry your name at night, you pull close and say it's alright. I look in your eyes, just like the rain, washing me red, wash over me. Touching your face, I feel the heat of your heartbeat echoing my head like a scream. What you do to me? Waiting so long, I'm all alone thinking about you. Jet City, it's a long way home without you. I see your face everywhere, can't get you out of my mind. Out of my mind. Whenever I'm alone, I'm thinking there's a part missing from my life. I wonder where I'd be without your love, holding me together now. Watching the time tick, tick away. My face grows longer every day. Since fortunes are lost on the women I've seen, without you I can't breathe in the air I need. Waiting so long, I'm all alone thinking about you. Jet City, gotta find my way home. Jet City, I see your face everywhere I look. Just 1,000 miles and I'll be there to make the clouds go away. Time for some blue sky. Oh, yeah. Come on, baby, bring me some of that blue sky. live till I'm free. I'll start the rain. Hey, follow me, follow me, yeah. No more nights alone. Feels like I'm never going home. I close my eyes and I'm in Jet City.
Nailed it.
Great acoustic arrangement.
Is it true that Jet City is Seattle?
Yeah, Jet City actually was the original nickname of Seattle. And then, I don't know why, but back in, just right after 91, 92, when like the grunge thing started happening and all the focus was on Seattle, on everything, you know, the city council got together and they thought, oh, Jet City, that's not such an appropriate name. We should be called the Emerald City. Yeah, the Emerald City. It's like Oz, right? So they changed it.
Emerald City woman just doesn't have the same ring.
Doesn't flow off the tongue so well.
Out of all the work that you've done, and I mean, in particular with the albums you'll be doing tonight, Rage for Order, the concept of that, how did you come upon that?
Yeah. Well, I've always been interested in futuristic writing, science fiction, and the futurists, you know, Isaac Asimov, for example, Roger Zelazny. These guys and others like them were really ahead of their time in the concepts they were exploring and talking about and thinking about. And as a young man, I read a lot of books by them and was inspired by them and started, you know, looking at the world through, I guess, their eyes, you know, on how things could be. And so many of the things they talked about years and years ago have come to pass, you know. We're now in the process of putting together mass transit systems across the United States to put, you know, freight trucks and things like that on a guided path so that we don't need operators or as many operators to make that happen. And that's happening now, you know. Just so many things. And anyway, Rage for Order was really inspired by those writers. And we were trying to adapt that kind of thinking to our music and try to create music that had a feeling of what it was like living in a modern world, a modern society. And so we went about recording our world that we lived in digitally at the time, and then putting it into, they had come out with this new keyboard at the time called the emulator, and you could take recorded sounds and put them into the keyboard, and then you could play them, and you could make music out of these sounds. And so the whole album is written with that. There's tons and tons of industrial noises and things that you hear in everyday life, but you don't think of them in a musical context, you know, but we managed to make that happen with Rage for Order.
Do you find it almost eerie that some of the things in it are applicable?
Yeah, it is kind of strange, isn't it? Yeah, spy satellites and GPS tracking systems, we were writing about that kind of thing well before they even became commonplace. You know, digital technology, artificial intelligence, it's always been really fascinating to me, and we're really on the cutting edge of that now. It's really happening, you know. So in our children's lifetime, they're definitely going to be using, I think, robotics as a commonplace thing, just like we're using cell phones now, you know. In fact, I think it must have been early 90s. I was watching television somewhere in Europe, and this guy got on the show, and he was talking about how in the near future, they were working on it at the time, you're going to be able to, you see a bus go by and have an advertisement, and he used the analogy of an artist, a band. And he said, and there's the band's advertisement going by on the bus, and you read the bus and you type it into your device, it goes, it hits a satellite, and you can download the music onto your device. And I was thinking, what? And that was Bill Gates on that show at the time. Nobody'd ever heard of him, you know. Isn't that weird?
Reach, Forder, and then Empire. Out of all the songs on Empire, what would you say is the highlight for you on that album?
Highlight?
I'm not going to use the word favorite.
Yeah.
They're like children, aren't they, your songs?
Yeah, some of them are good children and some of them are We have this one song called Anybody Listening that's on the album. And it's a song that Queensryche never played live because we just couldn't make it happen. You know, it's a very difficult song to play live. And we, of course, are forced to do it because we're playing the whole album. So we struggle, all of us struggle with that song at various times because it's very difficult to perform. In fact, we were warming up on it in the room the other day, or today, trying to wrap our heads around, you know, getting it better. And that's a very bad child.
Requires lots of discipline.
But a song like, you know, Jet City Woman, that's a very good child. Silent Lucidity, of course, propelled us to, you know, commercial success, you know, and the possibility of action figure dolls and that kind of thing. But yeah, there's a lot of great songs on that album, and we were lucky to be in the right place at the right time with a very strong album, and we had a very strong record company at the time who recognized the fact that our songs were getting airplay all over the country. And so they had a huge bank account, and they put like $6 million into promoting the record, you know. Thank you. You know, nowadays, you know, bands don't get $600, you know, to promote their records. So it was a different world back then, you know? And we were lucky to be in that spot and very fortunate.
What are your thoughts, because earlier we were talking about it and what you just mentioned about the record industry today. Like, what would you say to an up-and-coming musician? Well, your daughter is one, and Kieran, right? But you know, what is the biggest observation you have about how it was then and how it is now, and how would you suggest succeeding now?
Well, it's night and day. It's not even the same. When people say, oh, the record company is doing this, well, it's not even the same thing. Not even the same thing. They're talking apples and oranges, really. New bands starting out, new artists have it so tough because there's no money in it. There's absolutely no money in it, so you cannot make a living at it unless you have an audience. Well, how do you get an audience? You can't have, radio's not playing your song anymore, nobody's listening to it. You have YouTube, I suppose, but that's very difficult to compete on YouTube because there's so many other artists competing on it too. So without money to promote it, you're just spinning your wheels, you know? And, you know, well, you could go out and play live, but you know, how do you get an audience doing that? If you book a place to play, who's going to come see you? They don't know who you are. So you have to get on with an established act, and that established act is not too interested in bringing a nobody on the tour with them, you know. So then it requires having a lot of money to give the headliner band so that you can be on the tour, right? And that's a huge amount of money that it takes. So you can see the obstacles are really tough. Or you have a guy like me, you know, who wants to give his daughter's band a leg up, you know. My wife, who manages me and has for years, was in a pub in Ireland several years ago, and she saw this young band playing, this young Irish band, and she goes, "They're going to be huge. I'm bringing them to America." And she did. She brought the band to America, put them on a Queensryche tour, and they won the Viewer's Choice Award on MTV and became a fairly big band. And now we have the singer for that band, Mark Daly, who's released a beautiful album called When the Stars Align. He's on tour with us right now, opening up. So come early and check him out. He's an incredible singer-songwriter.
Yep. And how many of you are going to the show tonight? All right. Fantastic. We're looking very much forward to it. Yeah, I hope so, Scott.
I might come.
Well, I just can't. You've made my dreams come true by coming here today. It
Thank
really
you.
means a lot to us and your fans. And that's another thing I'd like to acknowledge about you, is that you are all about your fans and you're extremely modest.
No. Well. Got you all fooled.
Well, good job.
Are we gonna be able to like sign some stuff, take some photos?
Yeah,
and that
so
kind
I
of thing?
figured, I know I have to get you back for sound check, so
Okay.
I didn't know if you had one more song planned or if you
That's
wanna...
all we have prepared,
That's
but
fine.
next time we'll bring more.
That sounds like great. That sounds excellent. Thank you, Geoff Tate. Thank you, Scott, Kieran, for your time today. We love you. And until next time. And we'll see you tonight at the Haunt in Ithaca.
Thank you.
Thank you.